Solving systems of linear equations. There are several methods to solving systems of linear equations. One of them is the substitution method. We'll start with our procedure. Number one, solve one of the equations for one variable in terms of the other. What does that mean? That means to get one variable by itself. If the variables are x and y, then either get x by itself or get y by itself. It doesn't matter which row you do this for. Usually you'll have two rows. So your goal is to get either x by itself or get y by itself. If we're using different letters, A and B, then get A by itself or B by itself. It's usually the easiest when the coefficient is a 1, but sometimes we don't always have that choice. Okay, next step. Substitute that expression obtained in step 1 into the other equation. The result will be an equation with just one variable. Now that variable will appear more than once, but what we'll end up having is we'll have an equation with either only x or only y. Step 3. Because that equation has only one variable, either x or y, we will be able to solve that equation from step 2. So once we solve that equation, we'll end up having what x is or what y is, one of the two variables. And then we're going to use that solution obtained in step 3, along with the expression obtained in step 1, to determine the solution of the equation. Okay, well, let's get started here. You might want to pause and write down those steps, but maybe the example will make more sense. Okay, so here's our first example. 2x plus 3y equals 2, x minus 3y equals 2. So we need to decide which variable are you going to get by itself. Well, if you choose a top row, the coefficients of both x and y are not 1. The coefficient of x is a 2. The coefficient of y is 3. So the top row wouldn't be a good choice. It's doable, but it's not the best choice. The bottom row is a better choice because the coefficient of the x is just 1. So let's take the bottom row. How can we get x by itself? Right, all we need to do is move the 3y over to the right-hand side. So add 3y to both sides, and x equals 3y plus 10. You could write it 10 plus 3y, it doesn't matter. Okay, now we're going to substitute this into the other equation. Well, which one of those equations is the other equation? Right, the top row. So rewrite the top row. Now, x is equal to 3y plus 10. Let's say x was equal to 5. Then you would simply go to this equation and replace the x with 5. Then we could figure out what y is. Well, x is equal to 3y plus 10. So you're going to take this 3y plus 10 and substitute it into this equation, replacing the x with 3y plus 10. Now we have an equation with only one variable. It appears more than once, but look at this row. There's only y's in it, and we could solve that. Go ahead and do that. Distribute the 2, and then add like terms. So that's 6y plus 20 plus 3y equals 2. Now add the like terms. So 9y plus 20 equals 2. Subtract 20 on both sides to get the 9y by itself. 2 minus 20, yeah, that's negative 18. And then divide by 9 on both sides. So y equals negative 2. So we're halfway there. We have the y value, but we need the x value. So take this number, y equals negative 2, and go back to that equation from step 1 and replace the y with negative 2. That'll give us what x is equal to. You can actually go back to one of the original equations, but we've already got this equation in a really nice form here where x is by itself. So replace the y with negative 2. So x equals 3 times negative 2 plus 10. Multiply the 3 times negative 2. Add like terms. So x is equal to 4. We always write our answer as x comma y. It's a coordinate on a rectangular coordinate system. So the solution set is 4 comma negative 2 in parentheses. Now you might want to check our answer, especially if this was a test. You want to really make sure because it's so easy to make a mistake. Go back to each row and replace the x with 4 and the y with negative 2. So start with the top row and replace the x with 4 and the y with negative 2. Multiply and then add like terms. A plus negative 6, that will be 2. So we got the same number on both sides. That looks good so far. Let's go to the next row and again replace the x with 4 and the y with negative 2. Now 3 times negative 2 is a negative 6, but there's already a minus sign, so that's going to change this to 4 plus 6. 10 equals 10. We can now feel confident that this is the solution to this system of equations. Alright, let's do one more example. You might want to pause and try to work it out on your own. If not, we'll do it together. Which row would be the easiest to get a letter by itself? I would say the top row. It's a little bit more work than last time because there's a negative sign in front of it. But the y in the top row has a coefficient of 1. Actually a negative 1. But we'll be able to take care of that. So let's write the top row over to the left and get y by itself. So to get y by itself, what's the first thing we need to do? Right, subtract 3x on both sides. The sign of this 3x is positive because there isn't a sign in front of it, so it's assumed positive. So we're going to subtract 3x on both sides. Now don't forget about this negative sign in front of the y. You don't want to lose it. Bring that negative sign down. So negative y equals negative 3x plus 6. Now how do we get rid of that negative sign in front of the y? Right. Divide each term by negative 1. You could also multiply both sides by negative 1. The result would be the same. So negative over negative, this would be a positive y here, positive 3x, and a negative 6. Okay, now we're going to substitute this right-hand side into the other equation. So write down the other equation. Let's see, the other equation would be this bottom row. So write down the bottom row. Now replace the y with 3x minus 6. Distribute the negative 2. Yes, negative 2. Not just 2, but negative 2. So this turns into a positive 12 here. Negative 2 times negative 6 is a positive 12. A lot of students make that mistake of not distributing the negative, and they leave this as a minus 12. And it only takes one mistake to get the wrong answer. Add like terms. Subtract 12 on both sides. So 3x equals negative 9. Divide by 3. X equals negative 3. We're almost there. We have the x. What do we need? We need the y, right? So go over here to this equation on the left-hand side and replace the x with negative 3. Now work that out. 3 times negative 3, that's negative 9. Negative 9 minus 6, that will be negative 15. We have our x and y, so we'll write it in parentheses with the x first and the y second. Yeah, you're right. Let's do the check one more time. Replace x with negative 3 and y with negative 15 into both rows. Start with the first. So 3 times negative 3 minus, and then replace y with negative 15. And that should come out to be 6 if we did our math correctly. Let's see, 3 times negative 3, that's negative 9. And then minus a negative 15, that'll turn into a plus 15. And negative 9 plus 15, that is 6. Alright, halfway done with the check. Let's replace the x with negative 3 and the y with negative 15 into the bottom row. Do the multiplication. That's a negative 27. 2 times negative 15 is negative 30, but there's already a minus sign in front of it, so that's going to turn into a plus 30. And that'll give us 3 equals 3. Okay, I'll see you here for the next video.